Expected to visit Cuba this year, and with flights leaving daily and cruises leaving almost as often, it's never been easier to get there. But before you go ahead and book that trip, there are some very important things you need to know about traveling to Cuba. So joining us right now with some helpful information is Steve Marshall, CEO of Cuba Ventures Corporation. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. And we were just briefly talking during the break. You actually lived in Cuba for more than a decade. How was your experience there?
It's an interesting country. I mean, the culture in Cuba is amazing, and Americans are finding that more and more as they visit the island.
So when it comes to travel relations between the U.S. and Cuba as it currently stands, can you simply just book a flight and go?
Technically, yes. You have to sign an affidavit which essentially says that you're not going there for tourism purposes. Okay, so you're going there for cultural reasons or you're going there for educational reasons, and that is basically it.
Do you have to prove that you're with a group or with an organization that's doing something cultural?
Not at all. The Office of Foreign Assets Control has what is called a general license, and the general license is essentially what I just mentioned, which is you sign an affidavit and you're basically saying that you are not going to Cuba for tourism purposes, i.e. going to the beach just to get suntanned.
So where does somebody go about getting that affidavit?
Well, that is included when you buy the flight ticket.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you have to sign it when you buy the flight ticket.
Interesting.
And it's just ticking a few boxes and signing it.
Can you book a hotel in Cuba?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, obviously we offer 250 hotels in Cuba, but we're trying to urge Americans to embrace the private sector, that being the bed and breakfast provided by Cuban citizens. These are now the new private sectors, and also the private restaurants too. That is part of the enchantment of Cuba, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So business overall booming.
Very much so. From Florida, yes. We're getting a lot of travelers from Florida and also from California and the New York area.
Now, is there a best time to visit Cuba?
Well, there are best times not to visit Cuba.
Well, let's start there. Okay. What are the best times not to go?
Not to visit Cuba would probably be right around the Christmas period, okay? And then you have the Easter week, okay, which is sort of end of March, early April. It can get very busy at those periods of time. So, you know, we try and urge people to visit at any other time.
And once you get to the island, how is it in terms of public transportation? Is it readily available?
Well, the public transportation, you have a company called Via Azul, which will transfer you between the cities and towns, the 500-year-old cities in Cuba. But you have abundant taxis. I mean, you know, the old American cars are used for taxis, and you also have modern taxis. It's very easy to get around.
And what kind of currency should we bring along? What do we use once we're there?
Okay, well, you don't want to be taking U.S. credit or debit cards because they just simply won't work in Cuba for the moment.
Really? Okay? I didn't even think about that.
So you need to take an ample amount of cash, and that cash is then changed into the CUC, which is the Cuban currency, when you arrive on the island. Again, very simple to change the money when you arrive, both at the airport or all over the place, and it's one-to-one. So it's one CUC for $1, and the par value in terms of acquisition value to buy things is about the same as the dollar.
Now, if you bring any Cuban money back to the U.S. and you want to exchange it again, can you do that?
No, that would be a nice souvenir of Cuba. You cannot exchange it anywhere outside of Cuba.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very fascinating. So overall, do you recommend people take advantage of the time now to go to Cuba this year?
Yes. Obviously, there are a lot of people visiting Cuba, especially from Florida, as I've said. But I think that but now is the time, right? There are so many things, and Americans are just intrigued by the culture. I mean, hey, this is 90 miles from Key West. It's incredible. And lots of Americans consider Cuba as sort of like a time warp destination.
Yeah,
they're going back to the 50s. So yes, this is the time for Americans to visit Cuba.
Do it before it becomes too modern.
Well,
enjoy that step back in time.
Yeah, I don't think we'll be seeing McDonald's or Wendy's anytime soon.
All right. Steve, thank you so much.
Thank you very
fascinating.
much.
We appreciate your time.